Good morning.
Good morning.
How's everybody doing? Good, good. You all have a very special place in my heart for coming here on a holiday weekend. So thank you. It's nice seeing all of you, definitely. Welcome to All Souls Church here in Kansas City, Missouri. And is there anybody here, I'm scanning the room, that has brought a friend, a neighbor, an extended family member they'd like to introduce? I kind of figured it would go that way, definitely. Is there anybody visiting us? Hi. If you'd like, you're welcome to stand up and say hi. Hi, Cheryl. Definitely. Welcome. Yeah. And I saw somebody giving you the lowdown on our church, so we appreciate that. Any questions, never hesitate to stop at the membership booth. It being a quieter weekend, I just wanted to let everybody know if there ever is an event of something happening, we have 2 extra exits, one on each side of the room. Please keep that in mind. And
Scott, we have another visitor.
And who might that be? Hello. Hi, Theodore. Welcome to All Souls. And at that point, we'll go ahead and get on with the words of gathering.
Did you just take all our papers?
Oh, I did. Took her crib notes.
Good morning again and welcome. Happy Labor Day weekend. It is good to be here with you today as we celebrate the power of words to express our experience and to inspire our spirits. Today we honor the volunteer readers of our congregation who each week make the words of ancient scripture or contemporary headlines, the observations of intellectuals and the urgings of activists, the works of poets and storytellers and philosophers come alive in our worship together. Almost every Sunday, these readers take on the texts that I and other preachers assign to them. But today we have invited them to choose for themselves, to read what they would like us to hear from them. Some will share their own writings with us. Others will offer pieces that have moved their own hearts and minds. I want to say here in front of our whole community how much I value the dependable work and support of our readers, including their flexibility when it turns out that a particular service doesn't need them after all. I so appreciate when they take the time to check in with me about what tone or emphasis I'm going for, or to research the pronunciation of unfamiliar words or names, or to place a selection in historical context. Their dedication and competence is an important gift that they offer to all of us. I am grateful for their contributions today, as well as their service throughout the year. If you would like to explore the idea of joining our team of readers, you can be in touch with me or with Ruth Robarge, who will be managing the weekly rotation for this coming year. There she is right there. Right again. Also this morning, we hold in our hearts 2 monumental cultural icons of the past half century, singer Aretha Franklin and Senator John McCain. In very different ways, each of them has helped to define an era of American society, and their deaths close chapters of our shared history. Aretha Franklin helped us to understand music and soul. John McCain helped us to understand honor and sacrifice. You didn't have to be a musical fan or a political supporter to feel their influence or to recognize that two great lights have gone out and to know that their impacts will be with us for long to come. May they rest from their labors in peace and lasting memory. Let us kindle this chalice flame as a symbol of our free faith, with gratitude for the example of large talents and a renewal of dedication to use our own gifts, however great or small, in the service of the common good, so that our human family and all beings might dwell together in justice, in freedom, in beauty, and in peace.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Khalil, and I light this chalice for justice, equity, and compassion in human relations.
Good job. Thank you. Now let us rise together in body or spirit and speak the words of our community's covenant. Together we affirm, goodwill is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And will you remain standing for our opening hymn? Our commitment to human fellowship means that we are called upon to rejoice with those who are glad and to weep with those who mourn. And so we set aside this time in our worship together to share with one another the joys and concerns that are now shaping our lives. Am I doing this wrong? Yeah. I don't think it's on. Oh. More than one way to solve that problem. Thank you. As I was saying, may the beauty and sweetness of these brief flowers remind each of us to hold one another in the bonds of sympathy, encouragement, and care. And so as I invite you to come forward and share with us the joys or concerns that are now shaping our lives, be aware that in a few moments we'll turn the cameras off, so if you want to just wait until we're no longer live streaming, I'll tell you when we're doing that. And I want to begin by placing a flower of celebration and one with several stems for all of those who have worked so hard on our construction renovation project from the very first imaginings until our celebration last week. It's been a huge project, a lot of work, a lot of responsibility, and to everyone who was part of that and to everyone who has helped make it possible through your work and your donations, thank you. We're really glad to be at the very last stages. Good job.
In watching the services for the last couple of days, I was wondering to myself what these two people had in common. And the conclusion that I reached just within the last few minutes was triumph over adversity, because both of these people had extremely difficult times of their lives, but they pushed on to reach great accomplishments. And I think that we can be grateful for their contributions to our society.
That is a wonderful example to leave. I agree. Hey there.
I have a joy. My cousin just came up from Ohio, and I'm really happy that he's here.
That's a nice thing. How long does he get to stay? Okay, all right. So we might have for a while.
I'd like to celebrate that my twin sister had hip surgery not quite 2 months ago due to arthritis that was extremely painful, limiting her getting around, making her walk around with a cane, which makes me feel really possibly old. But after having the surgery, she's up and around and moving and not using the cane anymore and getting around great. So sad that she had surgery at less than 50, but it worked really well.
That's great news. Thanks. Yeah.
I'm having a joy to share that we all, or many of us, are going to be, I hope, involved with, and that is that this November on the ballot, Amendment 1 is an unbelievably powerful amendment to the Missouri Constitution that will dramatically improve the ethics of our General Assembly, our state legislature. That's a huge joy for me because it's so important. I do have a little bit of, not sadness exactly, but so few people know about it. And but I'm hoping that certainly people in this church will know about it and vote yes on Amendment 1, November 6th.
And spread the word.
Oh, thank you.
And spread the word. There you go. So I'd like to dedicate this flower to an actor that has touched the hearts of many, Stefan Karl Stefansson. His most famous role was Robbie Rotten in the show Lazy Town. And most people may find that silly, but he's touched the hearts of many through his show, through his works, and even through the internet. So, and he passed away this August. I'd like to dedicate that to him. Thank you, Isaac. Yeah. You are a limited edition.
Thank you. I want to, this is a sorrow. I want to acknowledge the death of a dear family friend whose name was Brian Dolney and who suffered a catastrophic head injury about a week ago, and who, despite the best efforts of the medical team at the KU Med Center or emergency, and otherwise they were unable to keep him alive. But he was a multiple transplant donor, and he's contributed to the lives of many people in that way. And there was a huge celebration of his life that was named Celebrating the Life of Brian.
Oh, yes.
And so his memory is shared with the memory of his good spirits and great humor. So
I'm sorry, Jack. Let's turn the cameras. Hour in honor of all the outreaching of the Spirit that abides unspoken in our hearts, and invite you to turn your attention to the screen and our congregational response. We'll begin on the right, which is your right, and the response will be from the left, which is your left. The sum of all prayers I have up in you, whoever you are. Those who govern are there for you. It is not you who are there for them. All architecture is what you do to it when you look upon it. All music is what awakes from you when you are reminded by the instruments. The sun and stars that float in the open air, the endless outstretching of the human spirit, unspeakable joys and sorrows, the wonder in everyone else, the wonders that fill each minute of time forever. It is all for you, whoever you are. It is no further away from you than your hearing and sight. It is hinted by the nearest, commonest, readiest. Do we consider Bibles and religions divine? I do not say they are not divine. I say they have all grown out of you and may grow out of you still. It is not they who give life. It is you who give the life. Will you seek afar off? You surely come back at last. In things best known to you, finding the best or as good as the best. In folks nearest to you, finding the sweetest, strongest, most loving. Happiness, knowledge, not in another place, but this place. Not for another hour, but this hour.
Every Sunday, I take a light jog around a park near my home. There's a lake located in one corner of the park. Each time I jog by this lake, I see the same elderly woman sitting at her water's edge with a small metal cage sitting beside her. This past Sunday, my curiosity got the best of me, so I stopped jogging and walked over to her. As I got closer, I realized the metal cage was in fact a small trap. There were 3 turtles unharmed, slowly walking around the base of the trap. She had a 4th turtle in her lap that she was carefully scrubbing with a spongy brush. "Hello," I said. "I see you here every Sunday morning. If you don't mind my nosiness, I'd love to know what you're doing with these turtles." She smiled. "I'm cleaning off their shells," she replied. "Anything on a turtle's shell, like algae or scum, reduces the turtle's ability to absorb heat, impedes its ability to swim, and it also can corrode and weaken the shell over time." "Wow, that's really nice," I exclaimed. She went on, "I spend a couple of hours each Sunday morning relaxing by this lake and helping these little guys out. It is my own strange way of making a difference." "But don't most freshwater turtles live their whole lives in algae and scum, hanging from their shells?" "Yep, sadly they do," she replied. I scratched my head. "Well then, don't you think your time could be better spent? I mean, I think your efforts are kind and all, but there are freshwater turtles living in lakes all around the world, and 99% of these turtles don't have kind people like you to help and clean off their shells. So no offense, but how exactly are your localized efforts here truly making a difference?" The woman giggled aloud. She then looked down at the turtle in her lap, scrubbed off the last piece of algae from its shell, and said, "Sweetie, If this little guy could talk, he'd tell you I just made all the difference in the world.
And with that, it's time for our young folks to go to their classes, and we will bid them goodbye with song. Oh, there you are. Come on up.
Hi, I'm Eva Vlock. I am the Health Services Coordinator at Rosebrook Center. We're a domestic violence agency, and I don't believe any of you know me personally, but I know all of you because you are my people. I moved to be here. I brought up my children in the Unitarian Church, and now they are bringing up their children. And one of my colleagues brought to my attention back in May, I think it was, an urgent need of a quality that is difficult. And I said, oh, I don't know. There's no money anywhere for that, but call the Unitarians because they are good people and they have great values. And she did, and honestly, you all couldn't help at the time, but we were asked to please come in September, that the offering would be made for us. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Rosebrooks. And next week when I come, I'm going to tell you more specifically about some of the health services that we offer. But Rosebrook Center, we just celebrated our 40th year. We provide services to men, women, children, and pets experiencing domestic violence. 1 in 3 women will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, and 1 in 7 or 8 men. So it is really in our community. We work in the hospitals, we work in the schools, we work in the court system, and we work in the community to end domestic violence. We have a 100-bed shelter that is full all the time. We also provide resources to survivors out in the community. We have counseling, we have case management, we have employment assistance, we have a little clinic in the belly of our shelter to help connect people with medical resources. We are providing services to thousands of people every year in little and large ways. And so I thank you so much for your contribution. I will be here afterwards if any of you have any questions about domestic violence. It would be unusual for you all to not know someone who has at some point experienced domestic violence, and you may know someone who is experiencing it right now. If there's any way that I can provide support to you, I'm glad to do that, or just answer your questions in general. So the offer is requested, the offer is given, the offering is received. Thank you.
Please join me as we dedicate our offerings to the work of this community. We dedicate our offerings and our actions to the mission at the heart of this congregation, to build a respectful, caring community, to inspire personal and spiritual growth, and to create change toward a just and compassionate society. And now I give you our readers.
Good morning. My name is Keely Schneider, and I'm a member of this church. And today I'm pleased to read an excerpt from a sermon I wrote and presented in the summer of 2016 on facing uncertainty and change. In her lovely book, Living Beautifully with Uncertainty and Change, Pema Chodron explains that nothing is static or fixed, that all is fleeting and impermanent is the first mark of existence. It is the ordinary state of affairs. Everything is in process, always changing, moment to moment. She is right, of course. We hate to admit it, but every second of every day is a moment of change. On the grandest level, our universe, born from the Big Bang, is ever expanding, ever changing. Stars coming into being and then dying. Matter meeting antimatter and exploding into pure energy. We are part of this great universe, and us, as such, are continually in flux too. At the human level, changes begin for you the minute you took your first breath, and they continue every second until your very last. Your body will replace each and every cell within it every 7 years. You are quite literally not the same physical being you were 7 years ago. But the impermanence of our existence brings a lightness or unfixed nature to our lives that we often find intolerable. We oddly long for the gritty heaviness of burden because it somehow brings us closer to what is tangible, easier to comprehend and manage. I know this longing well. When I was at rock bottom during my own divorce, I never once desired to lighten my pain through prescription drugs or serial dating. For me, the only way to get to the other side of it was to go through it. I craved being filled up with something as real and concrete as tears. Milan Kundera, in his famous book, The Unbearable Lightness of Being, observes that human time does not run in a circle. It runs ahead in a straight line. That is why man cannot be happy. Happiness is the longing for repetition. Yes, we long for the repetition and despise the change, so we fight it. Usually by doing one of three things. We deny, refuse to accept the change, ignore that issue. We avoid, simply try to escape the pain by taking drugs, abusing alcohol, numb ourselves to that emotion. Or we control, this is my personal favorite. We try to plan everything and everyone. So how do we keep a stillness inside of us when we find ourselves being pushed and pulled and acted upon without our consent? Pema Chodron counsels that the only way to get through the fundamental groundlessness of life is to turn toward it with a different attitude. I believe she is speaking of the concept of non-judgment, crucial in dealing with change in our lives. But it is something that I personally struggle with. I work hard on this and yet find it so difficult to drop my judgments. And while I certainly include dropping judgments of people in this concept, what I actually find more difficult is the ability to drop judgments about situations, about the things that happen to us. There's a Taoist story about a farmer that I'm sure most of you have heard. One day, this farmer's only horse ran away, and the neighbors came to console him over the terrible loss, and he says, "What makes you think it's so terrible?" A month later, the horse came back bringing 2 beautiful wild horses with her, and the neighbors exclaimed, "Oh, what fabulous fortune! You have such beautiful, strong horses." And the farmer says, "What makes you think this is good fortune?" The farmer's son was then thrown by one of the wild horses and broke his leg, and all the neighbors were quite distressed, and such bad luck. And the farmer said, "What makes you think it is bad?" War came, and every able-bodied man was conscripted and sent to battle except for his son because of the broken leg. And the neighbors congratulated the farmer, and once again he said, "What makes you think this is good?" Why do we label and judge so readily? I believe it's because of the ego. The ego is our survival mechanism for humans. Its only concern is that of self-preservation, not whether we suffer in that survival. So we push away anything that threatens our human identity, thus not identifying with our interpretations we put on our experiences very hard for us because we're so invested in them. They support our fixed identity and reinforce it. I lose a job and I'm no longer an employee, an engineer, or a banker. I get divorced and I am no longer a wife. I lose parents and I feel as if I'm no longer someone's child. To judge an experience or an event as good or bad brings a level of certainty and order to our lives. In order to curb our fear of change, we must reduce our compulsion to judge everything that comes in our lives. When we embrace this non-judgment, we are creating space between us and that thing that is happening to us. And in that space, we are able to embrace the full experience and not just our own narrow interpretation of it. In that space, we step into the opportunity for creation. Like clay, which can only be molded and shaped when it is soft and pliable, our minds can only create when we view this groundlessness as a gift. Only a dynamic state can give rise to alternative possibilities. Thank you.
The ego, right? What matters most, James Hollis, a Jungian therapist, psychoanalyst. Love him. One of the last chapters talks about how to live more fully in the shadow of mortality with the awareness that it's the ego that keeps us stuck. The universe is a fleeting idea in God's mind. A pretty uncomfortable thought if you've just made a down payment on a home. Woody Allen. The greatest affront to sovereign fantasies of the human ego is its perishability, the fact of which is profoundly inscribed in and unfolding through the eschatology of ourselves during each moment of this querulous, quarrelsome journey. Can't read with them, I can't read with them. All rising things fall, all ascendant things return to earth. All bodies in motion submit to the law of inertia. The pragmatic question that confronts us then is, what does this fact make us do or keep us from doing? And how might we live more abundantly in the present, in the presence of our mortality? And finally, does mortality even matter? We think of death as the great antagonist, the other who threatens us, forgetting all the while that death is our daily companion, not only in our existentially precarious perch above an abyss of annihilation, but in the sundry deaths of daily concourse. Our selves are dying, our understandings are dying, even memory dies if we live long enough. But something abides, and something is served by this dying, even though the ego is not thrilled. Good old Woody Allen once observed, he was not afraid of dying, he just did not want to be there when it happened. But apart from these sundry deaths, there is a more insidious death, the death that comes through absenting ourselves from life, avoiding these mysteries. Death is only one way of dying, living partially, living fearfully, is our more common daily collusion with death. As Jung asserted, deviation from the truths of the blood beget neurotic restlessness. Restlessness begets meaninglessness, and the lack of meaning in life is a soul sickness. Thus, a flight from the truth of our blood, which longs to return to the sea from whence we came, is a flight into the pseudo-world of illusion, distraction, and diminishment. So our question is really less about death and more about how we are living and what resolved values we embody in the face of mortality. Recalling Tithonus, life is meaningful precisely because it is finite. Choices must be made, choices matter, and choices define the quality and character of our being here. To avoid or to despair is easy. Death is easy, life is hard. The question is not how to solve our mortal condition, that is hubris and illusion. The question rather is how to live. Paradoxically, mortality, our most unwelcomed guest, is a friend, for it requires that question of us, the addressing of which brings us whatever quality we can manage in this short, precious life. After he nearly died from a heart attack, Jung wrote of his experience to his friend. My illness proved to be a most valuable experience, which gave me the inestimable opportunity of a glimpse beyond the veil. The only difficulty is to get rid of the body, to get quite naked and void of the world and the ego will. When you can give up that crazy will to live, and when you seemingly fall into a bottomless mist, then the truly real life begins with everything which you were meant to be and never reached. It is something ineffably grand. I was free, completely free and whole, as I had never felt before. Approaching such mystery with an open heart is what paradoxically makes this life richer. Before concluding where we may or may not be going, it might be more productive to be sure first that we are here.
The following are from this past year. The first was inspired by one casual conversation too many. December 2017. Tell me a story. Mine bore me. Tell me your story. I've heard mine 10 times over and I'm tired of it. Tell me of birth, sicknesses, the first loves, the fear, triumph. Tell me who you are, what you are. Don't hide from it again. Comes March and I celebrate my anniversary as a member of All Souls. For Don L. and Charlie, Jean Mac, Dick King, Carol, Joe B., Don Dietrich, Lowell, Liz, and Lucy, March 17, 1983. St. Pat's Day. It was then I knew time to start over, and I did. Coming here the next Sunday was like old home week. Knew lots of the folks already. It was easy and got better. But romance, ending as they do suddenly, no negotiation, no maybes, just over. Then, gradually, on to something better. Now 35 years of marriage and meals and meetings and memories, but too many good people gone. More now gone than now I know. But keep this place, guard this place, love this place. It will become sacred too to you. May 2018, some blackest thoughts. Or the world's going to the dogs and I don't care. Or climate change. What? Me worry? It's ending. The line is ending. There'll be no more from my line. My daughter shall bear no fruit. My son died too soon. But I do not regret it. I'm glad. I've learned to be a curse, a scourge, destroying, wrecking, pillaging. The only hope for the planet and all its wonders is our own extinction. Let us hope. Let us hope for it soon. Sometimes I most fervently do. Clearly, it is a day of despair, so please consider the following. Discovery. I had thought that as I grew older, I'd become jaded and cynical. Instead, I now find the marvelous in a leaf, when before whole trees pass without notice. Fall colors, October sky, autumn leaves, oak, maple, ash, each a song and a poem. And finally, I recently had a birthday. August 19, 2018. So, 79 years passed. 10% past my allotment. Not a bad gain on an investment made in Butler, Missouri. Not always a sure thing. There were several close calls, illnesses, squealing tires, running across the street unheeding. But they missed, and I'm still here for a while yet. Was my gain at another's expense, or just the luck of the draw? Who can answer? Who needs to know? Who dare ask to know?
Excuse me. On a quick personal note, between the current state of America and the last true champion of bipartisan politics being laid to rest this weekend, I can't quite muster the emotional energy to choose something optimistic for you today. So I've gone for gallows humor. Signs of Things to Come by Kansas poet Ansel Newsberg. On the road to Armageddon, I stopped to have a beer with 4 ambitious horsemen who suddenly appeared and baffled me with symbols, sacred seals, and scales, with supernatural horses, white, red, and black, and pale, the last one such a sickly green. In my delirium, I saw this as significant, a sign of things to come. On the road to purgatory, I wore a silly grin because I couldn't classify the 7 deadly sins. But the sinners all seemed happy, contented in the fire. Their disproportionate suffering, a payment for desires predetermined by a God who loves his children some and sends them cryptic messages as signs of things to come. On the road to pandemonium, I suffered wild regrets. Satan grants forgiveness, but he never quite forgets our secret, shameful moments, our disobedience, our fascination with the good that turns to greed and lust. These disturbing thoughts upset my equilibrium and tortured my recurring dreams with signs of things to come. On these roads and others like them, I see what seems to be a caravan of demons intruding on the sea, where a band of swarming angels engaged them in the foam to battle for the right to make this paradise their home. Now a martial tune is playing. Hear the trumpets and the drums. They're symbols of our madness, mere signs of things to come.
Following is an excerpt from a short story of a favorite author of mine, Charles DeLint, who writes what some describes as urban fantasy. He takes themes and characters out of traditional fairy tales and myths and firmly grounds them in the urban setting. In a made-up town called Newford, which he says Americans tend to think is Canadian and Canadians think is American. So, the story from which this is from, concerns the Conjure Man, a street person seen around Newford, who rides a bicycle, has a little dog in basket on the front of his bike, and Wendy, a young woman who's a poet, working a job to survive, has recently graduated college. So they're on the grounds of the university, and he's taken her to show her the scene behind the library where an old tree has just been cut down because it gave shade to the head librarian's office, and the wild bramble offended his sense of order. So, her death is a symbol, the Conjure Man went on. The world has no more time for stories. I'm not sure I follow you, Wendy said. He turned to look at her, eyes glittering with a strange light under the dark brim of his hat. She was a tree of tales, he said. There are very few of them left, just as there are very few of me. She held stories, all the stories the wind brought to her that were of any worth. And with every such story she heard, she grew. But there's always going to be stories, Wendy said, falling into the spirit of the conversation, even if she didn't quite understand its relevance to the situation at hand. There are more books being published today than have ever been in the history of the world. The Conjure Man gave her a sour frown and hooked his thumb toward the library again. Now you sound like him. But there's stories, and then there's stories, he said, interrupting her. The ones with any worth change your life forever, perhaps in only a small way, but once you've heard them, they are forever a part of you. You nurture them and pass them on, and the giving only makes you feel better. The others are just words on a page. Oh, I know that, Wendy said. And on some level she did, though it wasn't something she'd ever stopped to think about. It was more of an instinctive sort of knowledge that had always been present inside her, rising up into her awareness, now as though called forth by the Conjure Man's words. It's all machines now, the Conjure Man went on. It's what do they call it? A high-tech world. Fascinating to be sure, but John, the Conjure Man, thinks it estranges many people, cheapens the human experience. There's no more room for stories that matter, and that's wrong, for stories are a part of the language of dream. They grow not from one writer, but from a people. They become the voice of a country or a race. Without them, people lose touch with themselves. Well, now you're talking about myths, Wendy said. Conjure Man shook his head. Not specifically. Not in the classical sense of the word. Such myths are only a part of the collective story that is harvested in a tree of tales. In a world as pessimistic as this has become, that collective story is all that's left to guide people through the encroaching dark. It serves to create a sense of options, the possibility of permanence out of nothing. Wendy was really beginning to lose the thread of his argument now. What exactly is it that you're saying? A tree of tale is an act of magic, of faith. Its existence becomes an affirmation of the power that the human spirit can have over its own destiny. The stories are just stories. They entertain, they make one laugh or cry, but if they have any worth, they carry within them a deeper resonance that remains long after the final page is turned, or the storyteller has come to the end of her tale. Both aspects of the story are necessary for it to have any worth. He was silent for a long moment, then added, otherwise, the story goes on without you.
Certain poems in my life have become touchstones, and Edward Luter's Your Poem Man is one of them. Change, both professionally and personally, I've been involved in a lot of change. I can attest that trying to implement a non-traditional degree program at a very traditional university for very, very traditional faculty is somewhat like trying to turn around the Queen Mary in Brush Creek. And certainly the last 2 years in losing my beloved Lowell, downsizing, clearing out a house, buying a house, moving, holding an estate sale, and trying to sell a house has sometimes made me feel like I was being drawn through a knothole backwards. And I wouldn't have made it without a lot of good friends in this congregation's help. I thought of Luter's poem a couple of Sundays ago during Jack Phillips' fine sermon. I think Jack and Ed could have a great conversation over a few beers. So here is Luter's poem. Unless there's one thing seen suddenly against another, a parsnip sprouting for a president, or hailstones melting in an ashtray, nothing really happens. It takes surprise and wild connections, doesn't it? A walrus chewing on a ballpoint pen. 2 blue taillights on Tyrannosaurus Rex. Green cheese teeth. Maybe what we wanted least or most. Some unexpected pleats. Words that never knew each other until right now. Plug us into the wrong socket and see what blows or what lights up. Try untried circuitry, new fuses. Tell it like it never really was, man, and maybe we can see it like it is.
Several of our readers were out of town this morning, and so I conclude with 2 of my favorite pieces about the power of words and poetry. Walt Whitman says, "The maker of poems settles justice, reality, immortality. Their insight and power encircle things and the human race. They are the glory and extract thus far of things and of the human race. all this time and at all times await the words of true poems. The words of true poems do not merely please. The true poets are not followers of beauty, but the august authors of beauty. The words of poems are the crown and final applause of science. The sailor and traveler underlie the maker of poems, the answerer. The builder, geometer, chemist, anatomist, anthropologist, artist, all these underlie the maker of poems, the answerer. The words of true poems give you more than poems. They give you to form for yourself poems, religions, politics, war, peace, behavior, histories, essays, romances, and everything else. They do not seek beauty, they are sought. They prepare for death. Yet they are not the finish, but rather the outset. They bring none to the terminus of life, or to be content and full. Whom they take into space, to behold the birth of stars, to learn one of the meanings, to launch off with absolute faith, to sweep through the ceaseless rings and never be quiet again. And finally, from Marianne Moore, or contemporary poet, who says of poetry, I too dislike it. There are things that are important beyond all this fiddle. Reading it, however, with a perfect contempt for it, one discovers that there is in it, after all, a place for the genuine. Hands that can grasp, eyes that can dilate, hair that can rise if it must. These things are important, not because a high-sounding interpretation can be put upon them, but because they are useful. When they become so derivative as to become unintelligible, the same thing may be said for all of us, that we do not admire what we cannot understand. The bat holding dawn upside down, or in quest of something to eat. Elephants pushing, a wild horse taking a roll, a tireless wolf under a tree, the immovable critic twitching his skin like a horse that feels a flea. The baseball fan, the statistician, case after case could be cited did one wish it. Nor is it valid to discriminate against business documents and school books. All these phenomena are important. One must make a distinction, however. When dragged into prominence by half poets, the result is not poetry. Nor, till the autocrats among us can be literalists of the imagination, above insolence and triviality, and can present for inspection imaginary gardens with real toads in them. Shall we have it? In the meantime, if you demand on the one hand, in defiance of their opinion, the raw material of poetry in all its rawness, and that which is, on the other hand, genuine, then you are interested in poetry. Let's rise and sing our closing hymn. this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fires of commitment, because all these we carry in our minds and hearts until we are together again. And so, as the scriptures say, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honorable, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Go in peace.